One of the biggest trends of the past decade has been anime remakes, many of which have become even more popular than their originals. Series like Dororo, Devilman Crybaby, and Fruits Basket have all found tremendous success, breathing new life into classic stories. Yet, this season's remake feels even more special, one that could have a profound impact on the future of anime. Enter Ranma 1/2, one of the most iconic works by the legendary Rumiko Takahashi. The original anime, which aired back in 1989, ran for nearly 200 episodes and even spawned several movies. It was a massive hit, especially in the Western world. But let's be honest, looking back now, it hasn't aged well. The pacing feels sluggish, and while the animation was impressive for its time, it appears outdated to modern audiences. But despite these shortcomings, the legacy of Ranma 1/2 remains undeniable, and they knew better than anyone else how much money this beloved title holds. That's why it came as no surprise that the remake of it was inversed by none other than Studio Mappa. But were they able to maintain the vibe of a 90s anime? Has its story aged well, and can it still be considered interesting for a modern audience? Well, let's find out. The story, like most anime written during that time, is fairly simple. At the start, we are introduced to a man crying tears of joy as he calls his 3 daughters to discuss something important. One of them has to marry his friend's son, Ranma. But who is Ranma? Well, no one knows. Not the girls and not even their father. So, to their surprise, when they meet Ranma, they realize that he is a girl. Well, kind of. While training in China, Ranma and his father fell into cursed springs. As a result, Ranma turns into a girl when splashed with cold water, while his father turns into a panda and warm water changes them back. The story follows the lives of these two families as they try to live together. However, despite its seemingly simple premise, Ranma 1/2 became a pioneer in blending absurd humor with heartwarming moments, making it stand out among Takahashi's other works, and they nailed it without a question. But let's actually break it down and see the differences between the remake and the original, starting with something really simple, yet surprisingly hard to mess up. Back when Ranma 1/2 first aired, anime characters were often designed around simple, easily identifiable traits. You'd know a character's defining personality in the first episode, and it wouldn't change much over the course of the show. While modern anime tends to focus on character depth and development, with complex personalities and evolving motivations, older anime embraced simplicity. This was part of the charm. Characters were iconic and memorable, with distinct personalities that made them instantly recognizable and easy to root for. In Ranma 1/2, we see this approach in full effect. The character we spend the most time with is, of course, Ranma himself. He's generally a nice and considerate person, but his competitive nature often gets the best of him, even in situations where it's unnecessary. To say the least, he can be kind of an asshole sometimes, and it's a bit annoying that he can't read the room at all. But it's a character trait, no one should be perfect. Considering he's a martial art prodigy who's grown up with his father, constantly moving around and training, it makes sense that he hadn't much time for anything resembling a normal life. Our other main character is Akane, who represents what we now recognize as the quintessential tsundere, a character type that starts out cold but gradually reveals a warmer, friendlier side. This archetype makes a lot of sense, considering Rumiko Takahashi was one of the first to create what we now consider the tsundere trope. What I found really cool about her character is that it critiques traditional gender roles, showing that a girl can act differently from how traditional media at the time often portrayed them. I love that she's a character who is both strong and affectionate. Yet even now, if you look on sites like Reddit or Twitter, which I don't know why you would, you will see a lot of people missing the point of her character, dismissing her as annoying, which I completely disagree with. Now, one thing that has aged really well is the dynamic between the two main characters, a quality that, to be fair, Takahashi has consistently nailed across her manga. I love the chemistry between them. It's a perfect example of character archetypes creating a rich, layered dynamic without relying on complex backstories or deep emotional arcs. Each encounter adds to the absurdity of their situation, yet there is always an undercurrent of mutual respect and budding affection. In this way, Takahashi didn't just create memorable characters, she set the stage for an era of anime tropes that have since been carried on and reinterpreted in countless series. One aspect that does feel outdated though is the side characters. Throughout the entire show, they appear the same way every time, like Ryoga, whose entire trait is getting lost while trying to fight Ranma, or the doctor, who always becomes flustered and nervous whenever Kasumi is around. But as I mentioned before, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I actually enjoy it because we don't often see a modern anime approach characters in this way. These characters may not change or grow much, but their antics become part of the show's identity. However, what went through the biggest change in the entire show is obviously the animation and production. However, before we dive in, I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe so I can surpass my friends. We've seen quite a few anime get remakes with impressive animation, character design, and all that, but none have truly captured the same vibe the originals were known for. In that regard, Ranma 1/2 is absolutely outstanding. I love what Mappa did with it. The animation is much more detailed, borrowing from the original while adding new layers. Whenever we look at fight scenes, for example, I was surprised to see how simple they are compared to the remake, even though it was such a huge part of the original. The character designs also stayed very close to the original, so each character remains instantly recognizable, which I really appreciate because a lot of remakes lose that essence. What I love most about this remake is that it really tries to preserve the vibes of the original anime. It hasn't changed the story or the characters, it even kept details like the episode recaps, which ensure that longtime fans feel right at home. The coolest part though is that nearly all the original voice actors returned, and it's amazing to hear how good they still are. By blending nostalgia with modern animation techniques, Mappa has crafted a remake that isn't just a tribute to Ranma 1/2. It redefines what a classic anime can be in today's world. They understand the importance of keeping the humor, the absurdity, and the emotional beats that made Ranma 1/2 iconic. Ultimately, this remake isn't just about updated visuals, it's about preserving the story's essence. It brings back those quirky, lovable characters and presents them in a fresh light. Whether you are a long-time fan or discovering Ranma for the first time, this remake shows that some stories are truly timeless, and Ranma 1/2 will continue to charm generations to come. However, I think the most important part when it comes to a remake is to ask this one question. This is a tough question to answer, but I'd say it's a pretty confident yes. There are definitely aspects of the anime that feel outdated, like the character tropes, the constant misunderstandings, the slapstick comedy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If anything, for me, it's a positive because as I mentioned before, you don't see anime like this anymore. What is interesting is that, for its time, it was actually quite progressive, featuring a gender-bent character, and somehow, even 40 years later, it remains one of the most forward-thinking elements. So, is the Ranma 1/2 remake a good adaptation? Well, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're a die-hard fan of the original, you will find plenty of familiar moments, lovingly recreated with stunning animation. Yet the remake also has enough modern touches to appeal to a new generation of anime lovers, making it accessible without losing its core identity. Ultimately, Ranma 1/2 was never just about the comedy or the martial arts, it was about the chaos, the relationships, and the unforgettable cast of characters that made each episode unpredictable and fun. The remake captures this spirit beautifully, proving that some stories really do stand the test of time. What do you think? Is the Ranma 1/2 remake a worthy successor? Or do you feel it stays too far from the original's magic? If you want to see another video where I talk about all the other anime from this season, including Ranma 1/2, click on this video. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. Goodbye.